What if I told you that the expensive, invisible leader you've been told to use all winter is the exact reason the fish are ignoring your lure? It sounds crazy, right? We've had it drilled into our heads for years. Winter means clear water, and clear water means you absolutely need a fluorocarbon leader. But today we're going to challenge that belief. We're going to expose how that trusted piece of tackle might be doing far more harm than good when the temperature plummets. Stick around, because the truth about what's happening to your line in freezing water could be the single biggest reason you're not getting bit. So, let me ask you this right from the start. Are you blindly trusting your gear, or are you willing to see the truth? For as long as fluorocarbon has been on the market, the sales pitch has been simple and powerful. It has a refractive index almost identical to water, making it nearly invisible to fish. This became gospel, especially for winter anglers. When lakes and rivers turn crystal clear, the logic seems undeniable. You need every advantage you can get to fool wary, lethargic fish. So we all tied on our fluoro leaders, confident we were being stealthy. It became a habit, a ritual passed down from one fisherman to another. It's just what you do in the winter. But we rarely stop to ask if this one single benefit of near invisibility outweighs all the other factors that come into play when conditions get truly harsh. Let's start with the most obvious and damaging problem: stiffness. Fluorocarbon is inherently stiffer than monofilament. We all know this. But what most anglers fail to consider is how that stiffness is magnified by the cold. When you plunge that line into water that is 33 or 34 degrees, it doesn't just get a little stiff. It becomes wiry, almost metallic in its rigidity. Imagine trying to tie a knot with a piece of thin wire versus a piece of soft string. That's the difference we're talking about. This isn't a minor inconvenience. It's a fundamental change in the material's properties that has massive consequences for your presentation, which we'll get into right now. Now let's connect that extreme stiffness directly to your lure. Picture this. You're on the ice. It's a cold, still day. You're trying to finesse a tiny tungsten jig or a small, delicate spoon to entice a finicky perch or crappie. The key to triggering a bite is subtle, natural movement. You want that jig to quiver, to dance, to look alive. But it's tied to that wiry, unyielding fluorocarbon leader. Instead of a natural dance, your lure's movement becomes a clumsy, robotic twitch. The leader is so stiff it acts like a hinge, not a flexible connection. Your lure isn't swimming, it's being awkwardly puppeteered. A fish in a neutral or negative mood will spot that unnatural action from a mile away and turn its nose up instantly. This brings us to the next point. The freedom of movement is completely destroyed. A good leader should allow the lure to pivot and move as freely as possible. But a stiff fluorocarbon leader in icy water creates a direct, rigid link between your main line and the lure. Think about a small crankbait or a glide bait. It's designed with a specific wobble or darting action. That action is engineered assuming the line tied to it is supple. When you introduce a stiff leader, you dampen that action significantly. The lure can't achieve its full range of motion. It's like trying to run in deep mud. You're putting in the effort with your rod tip, but the leader is actively working against the lure's design, killing the very action you paid for. Let's move on to the second critical failure point, your knots. This is the one that will cost you giant fish. Tying a good knot requires the line to cinch down on itself tightly and securely, creating maximum friction and strength. Now try doing that with a cold, wiry piece of fluorocarbon. The material fights you. It has so much memory and stiffness that it doesn't want to conform into a tight knot. You can wet it, you can pull it with pliers, but you will often find that the wraps don't seat perfectly. This creates tiny gaps and weak points. A knot that you trust with your life in July might only have 50% of its rated strength in January. And you won't know it until a big walleye makes a run at the side of the ice hole. Think about this real-world scenario. You've been out in the cold for hours. Your fingers are numb. You need to retie. You grab your fluorocarbon leader material, and it feels like a guitar string. You fumble through tying your favorite loop knot or Palomar knot. You pull it tight, but did it really cinch? Or did it just create a brittle, stressed connection point? Later, you hook into the biggest trout of the season. The fish thrashes, the line goes tight, and then that sickening slack. You reel in to find that telltale pigtail curl of a failed knot. It wasn't the fish, it wasn't your drag. It was the line itself, refusing to cooperate with the physics of a good knot in the brutal cold. Now, let's tackle the sacred cow itself, the myth of total invisibility. Yes, fluorocarbon has a light refractive index very close to water, but it is not a magic invisibility cloak. Light still bends and reflects off its surface, especially with thicker diameter leaders. More importantly, in the unique lighting conditions of winter, especially under ice, the angle of the sun is low. This low angle light can actually catch the hard round surface of a stiff leader and create a flash or a glare. Instead of being invisible, your leader might be creating a thin, unnatural line of reflected light right in front of your lure. Is that really better than a line that might be slightly more visible, but is at least soft and supple? Let's talk about an alternative that we've been conditioned to ignore in winter: modern monofilament. People hear mono and they think of the thick, stretchy, highly visible stuff from 20 years ago. But line technology has come a long, long way. Today's premium monofilaments are incredibly thin, very strong for their diameter, and come in low visibility formulations like clear or green. Most importantly, monofilament retains its soft, supple characteristics even in brutally cold water. It doesn't turn into a wire. It remains manageable, flexible, and forgiving. It behaves the way a fishing line is supposed to behave, regardless of the temperature. The biggest advantage of switching to a high-quality monoleader in winter is the restoration of natural lure action. When you tie that same tiny tungsten jig to a supple monofilament leader, it's a night and day difference. The line is so limp and flexible that the jig is free to dance, quiver, and fall in the most natural way possible. The leader imparts zero unwanted stiff movement onto the bait. You are presenting your offering exactly as it was designed, and exactly as you intend with your rod work. You get that subtle finesse back, which is absolutely critical for tempting lethargic winter fish that are conserving every ounce of energy. And what about our knot strength problem? This is where monofilament really shines in the cold. Because mono remains soft and pliable, it cinches down beautifully every single time. The wraps bite into each other, creating a much more reliable and consistent knot. You can feel the knot seat properly as you tighten it. You're not fighting the line's memory. This means you can have much more confidence when you hook a big fish. That connection, that single point of failure, is significantly stronger and more trustworthy with a monofilament leader when the temperatures are near freezing. You're trading a tiny, questionable visibility advantage for a massive gain in reliability. Another huge issue with cold weather fluorocarbon is memory. Because it gets so stiff, it holds the shape of the spool it came off of. When you're jigging, this coiled memory can create a spring effect between your rod tip and your lure. Instead of a direct connection for feeling bites, you have this S-shaped buffer in your line. A light-biting perch can inhale and spit out your bait, and that subtle tick will be completely absorbed by the coils in your leader. You'll never even know the fish was there. You'll just be sitting there, thinking it's a slow day, when in reality, your leader was masking all the action. A supple monofilament leader, on the other hand, straightens out under the weight of your lure much more easily. It has far less memory, especially in the lighter pound test you'd use for winter finesse fishing. This gives you a much more direct line to your bait. That tiny tick of a bite travels up the line much more efficiently. Bite detection is crucial in the winter when takes can be incredibly subtle. And a stiff, coiled up floor leader is one of the worst enemies of sensitivity. You might as well be fishing with a bungee cord. A switch to mono can feel like you just took earplugs out. Suddenly you can feel everything that's going on down there. Let's put this into a practical test you can do yourself. Rig up two identical rods. On one, tie your standard fluorocarbon leader. On the other, tie a leader of the same pound test using a high quality, low-vis monofilament. Use the same lure on both. Fish them side by side. Pay attention to how many times you have to straighten out the fluoro leader. Notice how much more freely the lure on the mono leader hangs. And most importantly, Pay attention to which rod detects more of those subtle, tentative bites. I'm willing to bet that after an hour, you'll find yourself reaching for the monofilament rod far more often. Now, the pro-fluorocarbon crowd will bring up its main selling point besides invisibility, abrasion resistance. They'll say you need it for rubbing against the sharp edges of the ice in the hole or for fishing around rocks, and they are not wrong. Fluorocarbon is generally harder and more abrasion resistant. But we have to ask ourselves, how much of a factor is this really in most winter fishing scenarios? Are you constantly dragging your line over jagged rocks, or are you mostly fishing vertically over mud or sand flats? Yes, ice can be sharp, but a quality mono is tougher than you think, and careful fish fighting minimizes that risk. The truth is, for many winter applications, especially for panfish, trout, and even most walleye situations, extreme abrasion resistance is overkill. It's a solution to a problem that doesn't always exist. You are trading away lure action, not strength and sensitivity, three things that are critical in every single presentation, for an advantage that only comes into play in very specific situations. It's a poor trade. You are sacrificing performance 99% of the time for a 1% what-if scenario. It makes much more sense to rig for the conditions you are actually facing, which are cold water and finicky fish. Let's not forget the cost. Premium fluorocarbon is significantly more expensive than premium monofilament. We're often paying 2 to 3 times as much for a spool of leader material. So let's recap. We are paying a premium price for a product that becomes overly stiff in the cold, compromises our lure's action, makes our knots less reliable, and hinders our bite detection. Does that sound like a good deal? We're essentially paying more money to put ourselves at a disadvantage. It's a classic case of marketing and old habits, winning out over on-the-water logic and physics. Here's a radical thought. What if fish aren't nearly as line-shy in the winter as we think they are? These fish live in a world of weeds, sticks, and debris. They see lines all the time. What's more likely to spook a lethargic fish? A thin, supple line that allows a lure to look natural, or a completely unnatural jerky movement from a lure tied to a stiff, invisible stick? I would argue that presentation trumps visibility almost every time. An unnaturally acting bait is a red flag that screams danger, far louder than the faint silhouette of a thin, limp fishing line. The entire fluorocarbon in winter argument is built on the premise that invisibility is the single most important factor. But we've just laid out 3 massive counter-arguments: the destruction of natural lure action, the critical weakening of knots, and the loss of sensitivity due to memory and stiffness. Any one of these is a serious problem. When you combine all 3, the case against using fluorocarbon in very cold water becomes overwhelming. It's a material that is simply not performing at its best in this specific environment, and it's taking our fishing success down with it. So what's the solution? It's simple. Go to the store and buy a small spool of high-quality 4, 6, or 8-pound test-clear monofilament leader. Don't grab the cheap stuff. Get a good quality copolymer or monofilament from a reputable brand. Spool it up, tie it on, and just try it. Forget what you've been told and let the results speak for themselves. I promise you will be surprised by how much better your lure looks in the water, how much more confidence you have in your knots, and how many more of those light bites you start to feel. Now, is there ever a time to use fluorocarbon in winter? Perhaps. If you are fishing extremely clear water for the most line-shy species on Earth, like certain trout in spring creeks, and the water is slightly warmer, say above 40 degrees, then maybe the trade-off is worth it. Or, if you are specifically targeting big fish around sharp, jagged rocks or zebra mussels, where abrasion is your number one concern, it could be the right choice. But for the vast majority of ice fishing and general cold water applications, it has become a crutch that is actively hurting our success. The final verdict is this: we, as anglers, have over-indexed on the idea of invisibility, while completely ignoring the laws of physics. We've been sold a warm weather solution for a cold weather problem. The stiffness, the knot issues, and the unnatural action that fluorocarbon imparts on our lures in freezing water are not small details. They are critical failures that can mean the difference between a great day and getting skunked. It's time to adapt our thinking and realized that the supple, reliable, and more natural presentation of a modern monofilament leader is the true secret weapon for cold water success. So let's bring it all home. We've been operating under the assumption that fluorocarbon is the ultimate winter leader because it's invisible. But today we've seen that in the freezing cold, it becomes a stiff, brittle, unmanageable nightmare. The biggest takeaway, the real aha moment, is that the unnatural lure action caused by that stiffness is likely spooking more fish than the visibility of a supple monofilament line ever could. We're so focused on what the fish might see, we forget about what they feel and how they react to movement. This realization should completely change your approach. You're no longer just choosing a line, you're choosing a presentation style, and in winter, a natural fluid presentation is everything. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to question the old ways. If this video gave you something to think about, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that cuts through the noise. And now I want to hear from you. What has been your real-world experience with leaders in the winter? Drop a comment below and let's get a real discussion going.